So thank you to the Master Leader Program faculty, first of all, for graciously giving of their time into this gift of a mindfulness dialogue between Lisa Furrer and Sheldon Burroughs, and supported by Natalie Vessels, who is our Master Leader Program pre-program initiative events coordinator and organizer. And welcome to those who are on the call today. My name is Anita Craig, founder of the Master Leader Program, and really looking forward to this particular dialogue, which lands in a time that I think is needed more so than ever before. And on a personal note, I have just journeyed through the inaugural Inner MBA program based in the USA. And heading up that program, one of the co-hosts and contributors was a gentleman called Scott Shute, who holds a very interesting role at Google. He is head of mindfulness and compassion. And it was a really eye-opening thing, particularly sitting in this seat from this vantage point here in South Africa, that an organization takes it upon themselves to have a role dedicated to mindfulness and compassion in the workplace. Now, that all came about pre-COVID, but it's gaining momentum mainstream in organizations that are waking up to the real need and difference that mindfulness and the pivotal role that it plays in organizations and in life in general, but particularly in the workplace, and this rise of mindfulness in the workplace. And that's exactly what Sheldon and Lisa are going to be bringing forward today in this dialogue, is to speak from their direct experience in this subject. And hopefully we're going to elicit very many interesting sound bites and pieces that are going to be takeaways that just starts to sow more and more of these seeds of the real importance for this work in the world today. So I would really love to hand over to Sheldon and Lisa to really set the current context for what it is that they would love to share with everybody today.
Great. Thanks so much, Anita. And welcome everybody to our dialogue this afternoon. Looking forward to sharing some ideas and sparking some questions and just enjoying the present moment that we are sharing together. Time seems to be so precious these days. And, in terms of the given context that we have, there's just so much happening. There's so much that the individual is kind of being exposed to. I mean, if we just take our current situation in South Africa, the COVID numbers are higher than they've ever been. We're back into sort of hard lockdown type situations. And there's a lot that's getting thrown at people and individuals currently. I mean, I think of the acronym VUCA, which was a bit of a buzzword a couple of years ago. But I think it's still very much relevant to the times that we find ourselves in. There's volatility, there's uncertainty, there's complexity, there's ambiguity. And from my perspective, just considering the individual, just from an uncertainty perspective, we're not living sort of 6 months at a time or even a year at a time in terms of our outlook and our view. It's almost living week to week, in some cases, day to day. So, and I think it's as a result of that uncertainty. People just don't know what tomorrow's going to bring or the next day. And I think it certainly offers, in that challenge and that difficulty, it offers an opportunity for something like mindfulness to really play a role. If you just think about not only the economy being uncertain, but even health-wise, people have uncertainty. And it's something I've certainly picked up quite a lot in my coaching of late, just understanding that people are dealing with high levels of anxiety and fear that almost pushes them to the point of feeling overwhelmed. And that, even working from home, should have had a healthy impact, but it seems to kind of be having the opposite impact. I've had one or two of my coachees that have kind of become nostalgic to the days of driving to the office and then driving back home, just to have that time to kind of de-stress a little bit. Now they're getting booked for meetings from 7 in the morning right up to 6 o'clock. I've been booked for a meeting, for example, today that's ending at 8 o'clock. So those boundaries seem to just have been shifted completely, and it seems to be okay. And I think that's a big part of what sits at the heart of the context that we find ourselves in, and just some of the challenges that are being thrown at individuals.
I would love to interject just at this moment, just before we move to Lisa, but from your experience, and just for the listeners' benefits, really, and the participants, I'm very aware of your background, having met you in corporate. You were one of my clients working in a large corporate here in Johannesburg, South Africa. Your qualifications being an industrial psychologist, and you were very much in the heart of HR and human capital, and working with people in the organizational space, as well as the organization's development space. And then you moved out, and you've been walking this journey now on your own as an individual consultant, and seeing almost the dance from the other side, and looking back into organizations now on the outside, partnering with them. And so really just wanting to bring that context into play in terms of such interesting insights from those perspectives of being in business and now working alongside business, and what you're seeing. And then this value of mindfulness. And it's not an easy subject either for some still inside organizations to perhaps digest or get their heads around. So very much looking forward to those perspectives today in this webinar. So thank you.
Thanks, Anita.
Yes, thank you. So I'd like to come in from the angle of really just emphasizing the kind of breakdown, the mental health struggles that people are having, and a real sense of fragmentation, overwhelm, and how desperately as human beings we need to cultivate capacities, tools, ways of being that really offer us a kind of a stability, an inner stability that we can grow and strengthen from within inside ourselves. I think what's becoming quite evident is that it's, there's a limit to how much external systems or tools can actually offer us. And I think to manage the difficulty and complexity, we are needing to self-resource. And mindfulness is a really powerful, what I call a self-navigational tool. So instead of coming from the outside, which direction should we take? It's this capacity to strengthen and develop this internal capacity to navigate our lives. And so, I agree. I'm seeing a lot of burnout, seeing a lot of overwhelm. And truly there's a real urgency. And so, my experience as a mindfulness facilitator and long-time practitioner, I'm just really keen to share the value and plant the value of this work into the world. So I'm really grateful to have this opportunity.
Thank you, Lisa. And I couldn't agree with you more around your speaking into this internal resourcing and leveling up and skilling up and paying attention to that. So fundamental, and actually it's what we have to work with as our very selves when no other tools become available. And ironically, how interesting, especially as South Africans, just the example literally of when we have what is called load shedding, And to the rest of the world who are not familiar with that terminology, it's when our power goes down, our electricity nationally on the grid, different sections of the country, we have to literally go offline without that, being powered up. And what we have left with is ourselves and our natural resources to work with in those moments. And there's a choice there, there's a choice to get grumpy about it, irritated, seeing it as, a barrier, and or tuning back into ourselves in ways and cultivating the deeper inner relationship just with what is around us, the natural day, the natural light, the dark, etc., etc. And so it is here, working with these capacities. And Lisa, just welcoming your presence and your gift to people in this call, because you're not coming in from mainstream business, but you're coming in from the channels of being an entrepreneur, being a businesswoman, but in the creative concept, and having then also worked specifically with mindfulness-based stress reduction, and again, working in the educational space into business schools, institutions, and really that angle of humanity, bringing that mindfulness of the human being, because we're working with human beings in the workplace, after all, no matter what the context is. And thank you for that, your deep insight in the way that you see this world of mindfulness and your capacities of working with it in a way that really is a fine craft that you've honed in over the years. And I've been following you over the years. I remember attending one of your mindfulness-based stressful workshops back in 2006 or 2008 in Cape Town. And you've been going at it, year in and year out. And there's something to be said for that when the teacher is dedicated to their own practice to the degree that you are. And thank you for being the inspiration and the light just by showing up in the way that you do and cultivating this presence and bringing it alive in such an authentic and real space for people to access and learn from and grow from. So handing back to both of you, because let's get going. I think we've posed this question at large around what does the landscape of leadership look like at the moment in organizations, and what is the call leadership now has to make in response to this context, this environment that we're living in, current reality today. So Sheldon, question, let's start with you, open it up to you, what your insights are.
Great, thanks Anita. I think you've hit the nail on the head. It certainly does pose a question to leadership, because I think there is a call to leadership to respond. I think that's part of what leadership is there for. And I think for me, in terms of what I've observed, not only internally, but kind of externally as well, is that two things kind of become critical. The first one is around communication. So I think because a lot of people, a lot of employees and staff are sitting with this high level of uncertainty and dealing with this fear and anxiety, what they really need from leadership is transparent and consistent communication. And the type of communication that is explicitly there to try and provide more certainty into their lives. That's definitely for me the one. I think another one places the emphasis on the values of an organization, because that's also kind of being brought into question to some degree. And leaders now have to really grapple with what the values of their organizations truly mean. And can they give expression to those values in their behaviors and demonstrate that to their employees? The thing with culture is it doesn't mean all that much when things are going well. But when things are tough, that is when the true culture reveals itself. And I think a lot of companies are experiencing that type of situation, and they're having to face themselves and ask themselves, are we actually able to live up to those values? If we have the word respect or care pasted on the wall, what does that actually mean? And how do we really demonstrate that for our people? Because now is the time when those type of values need to shine. So that's something for me that certainly stands out from just some of what leadership needs to be providing at the moment.
Thank you. So interesting. And what I sort of tuned into there was this call to leadership. And it feels like the time now is this call. We cannot lead in ways that we've done in the past. We cannot rely on a lot of the past that no longer serves us in the current conditions and climate. And one of the awakening leadership traits that I'm observing, either people have got it and they're awakened to it, or they're awakening to it, or it's something that yet needs to be coming alive. And that is two things really, but they go hand in hand. The one is taking responsibility, taking ownership and responsibility. And the second then that leads on from that is making contribution. And it can sound obvious, and it can maybe sound an easy thing to do. In Maslow's hierarchy of needs, almost, once those lower order needs have been met, before one moves into self-actualization, actually there's this place for making a contribution. But we can only do that when we've taken radical self-responsibility. And my question, it's a very real question, because I'm not sure I have the answer to this. And this is what I'd love to gain your wisdom and your insights from, is when a leader is grappling just with what they're going through in this VUCA world, what are some of the things that they can do to successfully achieve that? How do they stay centered, take responsibility, and then actually make a contribution and lead people when they themselves may be feeling quite unseated, uncertain, and shaky in these times?
The development world of leadership is responding to that. There's definitely been some research over the last while that has kind of put a spotlight on the fact that there's probably been a bit of an overemphasis on the exterior of the leader, focusing on those behavioral competencies. Whereas what research is showing us is that there's a growing need and importance for things like meta skills, which are those inner competencies that are becoming far more important to deal with the world that we're living in. And, those are things like humility, adaptability, resilience. And it's also, I think, to a large degree, some organizations that have a sense of disappointment from some of the traditional leadership programs. They don't always seem to have the impact or the staying power that they promise up front for those individuals. And here I'm happy to segue into Lisa, because I think it shows us that there's some kind of an inner shift that needs to happen that a lot of the traditional leadership programs are not necessarily providing. Lisa, I know you've got a lot to add on that.
What I'd love to do, Anita, in response to your question, your comment, is to just take a step back, and maybe, Sheldon, you can you can move to the next slide, because I thought, in making the case for what mindfulness is able to offer, or put it this way, what are the actual competencies? It might be useful, especially for those people that have maybe not come across mindfulness before, is just to have a very brief exploration to just, to locate it, to understand the definition a little bit. And of course, this is just a definition. And I think the very first thing that I could say about mindfulness is that it's a practice, and it's something that needs to be tried out and tasted. So hopefully this webinar will plant some interesting seeds for those who are listening. But just to say that this is a working definition, and we're going to be chatting a little bit more in the webinar about the mindfulness-based stress reduction and the sort of leadership programs that have emerged in the wake of it. But this is John Kabat-Zinn's working definition, that mindfulness is the awareness that arises when we pay attention in the present moment without judgment. And that's very interesting, because really what this definition invites is a sense that paying attention is a skill, learning to direct it into the here and now without judgment is a skill. These skills are honed, they are the practice itself. But then through the successful implementation of this honing of attention, what arises is our awareness. In a way, the awareness, ironically, that's always there, but can be very clouded over by those fears, those anxieties, those concerns, and, just feeling overwhelmed. So when we are able to steady ourselves, ground ourselves in the present moment, resource ourselves with our breath, with our attention, directing it appropriately, reining it in, then this natural awareness, which is the source of our aliveness, the source of our creativity, it's what is unfolding in the present moment, becomes available to us. So I just wanted to work on that definition, and also to say that the mindfulness is part of many ancient spiritual traditions, and John Kabat-Zinn's use of the Buddhist mindfulness as his kind of springboard into offering secular mindfulness into the world is that he felt that it was the most precise articulation for the development of practices of wakefulness, kindness, and compassion, which, if we circle back to the start of our conversation, how important these skills are to cultivate. And, he says, this is a lovely little quote that I'd like to share with you, is that the message of mindfulness is an invitation to everybody to wake up to the true dimensionality of who we all are, and to move in a direction of maximizing the good that comes from our activities and minimizing the harm, both to ourselves and others. And he says this could be done on a corporate level, a national level, an international level, a global level, and first and foremost, on an intrapersonal level inside of ourselves. So I love the possibility that this practice offers. So I think, that's good for now. Sheldon or Anita, over to you.
Thank you, Lisa. Over to Sheldon, because I know, Sheldon, you also have some ground to cover, and laying some foundations for the dialogue to flow from here.
Great, thanks, Anita. Yeah, and I couldn't agree with Lisa more. I'm definitely going to touch on something that you mentioned there in a moment. But maybe just as a little bit of an example, when we talk about the VUCA world, I mean, part of some of the work that I've done recently is just kind of exploring conceptually the field of mindfulness and leadership and how we could potentially bring these two worlds together. And there's so much happening in that space. It's incredibly exciting. But maybe just to use one tiny example, if we just consider the context we've been talking about, and just take uncertainty as an example. So uncertainty is really just when a situation presents a predicament where the outcome is really difficult to predict. So something we're all very, very familiar with. And something like mindfulness, a mindfulness practice, very much to what Lisa was just explaining and the work that John Kabat-Zinn has done, having that sort of mindfulness approach and practice cultivates certain qualities. One of those qualities is one that is called patience. If we just take that one as an example. And by having a patient approach, it allows us to kind of stay the course when the future is unknown. So in the face of that uncertainty, mindfulness offers us something of a competency to actually deal with that situation a little bit better. So this is part of the work that I've kind of been doing and just exploring the idea of how we can bring these two worlds together. So what that basically led me to was to think a little bit about leadership. And there are many different frameworks, there are many different theories about leadership, and I kind of dived back into all of them in terms of just refreshing my memory again back to my studying days. And I came upon these two quotes that are relatively recent from two real leadership gurus. The first one, John C. Maxwell, who in 2019 said, "I've watched leadership evolve, but there's one part of leadership that always works regardless of culture or time, and that is servant leadership." Another one is, let me just get the next one up, is Ken Blanchard, somebody that's done a lot of work, written many books around leadership and coaching. In one of his latest books, Leading at a Higher Level in 2018, he speaks about the importance and the relevance of the servant leader in the face of self-serving leaders. And I love this quote from him where he says, "The best leaders are simply good people." It's so simplistic, but there's such truth to that. So this really got me thinking around, can mindfulness contribute towards the competence of leadership? And if we take servant leadership as an example, this is the one that really stood out for me. And I think it really echoes the spirit of mindfulness. And I also feel that it lives up to some of the current contextual challenges that we've been speaking about. So I don't necessarily want to go into all the detail, but just to share some of these competencies with you that speak to what does a servant leader look like. So there's listening, there's empathy, there's healing, awareness, foresight, stewardship, commitment to growth, building community. So just in looking at these few competencies, I think we can already see that there's the potential for bridging some of the elements and ultimately the pillars, which is what I was exploring from a mindfulness perspective. So what I really wanted to do was to try and look at it formally and try and work with some tried and tested frameworks. So servant leadership has been tried and tested. If we look at mindfulness, and Anita, you've mentioned it a few times, mindfulness-based stress reduction. It's by far the most tried and tested program. It's been around since 1979. It's still going very strong today and having a huge impact in assisting people, not only people within the sort of clinical field that are going through some illnesses and therapy, etc., but it's also been utilized in different settings with students and communities, and it's had a huge impact. So if we just consider the pillars of mindfulness that come out in MBSR, it's things like non-judging, patience, as I've mentioned, beginner's mind, trust is another one, non-striving, acceptance, letting go, kindness, and the last one then there, curiosity. So part of what I was really trying to do is to then say, I've experienced it for myself. So I've also been a huge fan of mindfulness. I've had a kind of mindfulness practice and meditation practice for many years. I know what it's done for me. I've used it in the work that I've done for other people, and I've seen the impact that it can have. But is there some way that we can try and do this formally and actually show, based on the theory, based on the work that has already been done, is there some way that we can show that it actually can have an impact? And that was really what was driving this piece of work that I was doing. I think,
just on that note, because the skeptic in people is sitting in that seat of an organization that may be not one of the early adapters or the bushwhackers, at the head of the curve, like a LinkedIn. And my apologies, Scott Shooter's head of mindfulness and compassion at LinkedIn. Previously, I'd referenced Google, which was a mistake. But they're not all of that ilk or of that inclination. They're people behind the curve. And so making this case, it's kind of me, it's like, so what of all of this? How's this going to help our organization? Because a lot of organizations, and particularly now, are so focused just on that bottom line survival. I mean, we've seen here alone in South Africa, and there's no judgment on this. This is just dealing with the hard facts. businesses going into liquidation, business rescue, retrenchments happening, salaries being reduced, etc., etc., many sacrifices being made. So how is a leader going to have that time and the motivation to go, if I can hook my trailer onto mindfulness, this is going to help me through in a very real way that's going to make a difference to the survival, perhaps even it comes down to that bottom line in an organization. So if we can just draw on those links, and why I'm posing that difficult, challenging perhaps question to the panel of experts here is because I believe you've seen this. As you've pointed, you've had direct experience of when it happens and when it doesn't happen, and what's the difference with and without.
I'd like to just, for people who are skeptical, I think it's really nice to actually get a real sense. And Sheldon, if you'll go back to, I think it's slide number 2 for me. So yesterday, I Googled how many scholarly research papers are there looking directly at the impact of mindfulness on leadership. And 53,500 came up, and these are not just, articles written in, magazines. These are scholarly articles in peer-reviewed journals to do with higher education, to do with leadership. So that for me really made an impact. And then this is, can you trust Google searches as a research methodology? I'm not sure. But when I started teaching mindfulness to MBA students who, now we're talking 2007, 2008, this was really like out there, it was just not, it was like, what are you bringing this into a business school for? And so I started doing, over the years between 2008 and 2014, I started doing Google searches, and look where it started. And then I had a long break, and here we come. If you go all the way down, you'll see that in 2021, there are millions of hits. And obviously these are, people are sharing again and sharing on their blogs, but it does say something. It just really made an impact for me, that it's promising, it's more than promising, and resources are going into showing how, not just an intuitive hit, but really showing how, and also, showing the manner in which success in this arena is achieved. And I found that really interesting. And, as we've spoken about, this is becoming, seen as a crucial skill, not just a nice to have. And here are, very brief, what the practices offer: capacity to calm the mind and body, to be more resilient, to be more aware of the situations we find ourselves in. And then my final little, if we go to the next slide, this I love because yesterday I found this piece of research which was published last month. And, it's got a beautiful title, Becoming Aware of the Leader Within. And this was a piece of research coming from the University of San Diego, a 4-week program with wonderful benefits for the leaders in training around self-awareness, decreases in those, very difficult states of stress and anxiety, and, an increase in being able to be just more efficient in terms of who you are as a human being and in your leadership. And then also what I really loved is this capacity to hold multiple perspectives and feel kindness and compassion towards themselves and others, which are those, those key competencies that we've been speaking about. And so I just wanted to really reiterate that research and bring it up for us to really look at and feel, wow, this is happening. It's really happening.
Lisa, thank you. You have more than answered my question that was posed. And what I love about this piece is the very piece that speaks to the nature of the work that we are offering people on the Master Leader Program. Here's the research, here are the hard facts, here are the numbers, here are the stats, and this is the program for people in terms of the how. how to go about, how do you integrate mindfulness practices to foster these qualities, traits, and cultivate a more mindful leader in an organization. Thank you so much. Great research. Back to you, Sheldon.
Great. Yeah, I think that's hugely exciting if you just consider where we've come in a very short space of time. And I think anybody out there that's looking to do some research, this is definitely a field that would be worth looking into and spending some time on. So if I can maybe just build on the discussion that we're having, just in trying to find something of a model and a framework that could be a bit of a guide for us. So what I basically did was I took all of these 9 mindfulness-based stress reduction pillars and asked the question, could any of these have some kind of an impact on those competencies that we saw in the servant leadership model? So obviously there's a lot of research that's already been done from a servant leadership perspective to show that those competencies have a positive impact on the ability to lead. So I'm going to just do 2 for us here. Obviously, we don't have that much time. So let's take one of those pillars, which is non-judging. So very much a quality and outcome of having a mindfulness practice and doing something like the mindfulness-based stress reduction program. So non-judging in a nutshell is where we pay attention to whatever is occurring in the present moment without judging it. So really suspending that judgment, having the ability to step back from automatic judging and reacting. And it speaks exactly to what Lisa was mentioning and the definition from John Kabat-Zinn. So if we consider the leadership components, so those, just the competencies that I could see coming through here. The first one is listening. So somebody that comes to their leadership role from a non-judging perspective is much easier going to facilitate empathy for the internal states of others. It will be far easier to truly place yourself in the shoes of somebody else and see the world through their perspective. And ultimately also then to clarify the will of the group, which is part of what that listening is meant to do for the leader. And I can clearly see how having a non-judging attitude can really enhance that particular competency. If we look at the next one, healing. Accepting where people are in their journey to wholeness is really what this is about. And I think without this non-judging, it'll be very difficult. I mean, so many times people are projecting their biases, projecting their own stuff onto people, onto situations. And the more leaders can learn to stop doing that, to prevent themselves from putting that judgment onto the situation or to the person, the easier they will facilitate healing and helping people move from a place of, I suppose to some degree, feeling down and out to wholeness. Another one, awareness. I think it's a key one that kind of stretches beyond just servant leadership. Any kind of leadership model or framework has some aspect of awareness linked to it. And absolutely what this does is it helps the affect regulation of the person. So in other words, there's a certain aspect to mindfulness that allows you to regulate yourself a little bit better. In this instance, the regulation of your emotions. Do you allow your emotions to take control of you, or are you able to arrest a little bit of control back and not allow the emotions to take over? And this is definitely something that a non-judging attitude will assist in, creating that awareness, which ultimately helps to improve emotional intelligence. All right, and then the last one here that I want to touch on is stewardship. And I think this one speaks so beautifully to what servant leadership really is all about, which is serving the needs of others, but doing so without that sense of criticism. And I think that's where a lot of leaders kind of fail, because there's a lack of authenticity. There's a lack of that real genuineness that comes through in the way that they try to serve, the way that they try to help. And without that, people are never really going to follow the leader. They may comply, but they're not going to commit. And I think that's a big piece that gets offered here in terms of the stewardship piece. So if we just take the one pillar, non-judging, we can already see there are 4 different competencies that it is directly impacting. And from what I can see, will have a certain element of enhancement to that piece. So I think I'm going to hold there for now, and let's maybe see where the conversation goes. And if we have a chance to look at another one, we can do that.
Thank you, Sheldon, for this robust research. And, you know, what it brings up for me is that each piece, when you double click on it, like you've done here with non-judging as an example, opens up these different facets and these subcategories for us to take a deeper look into and tune into and dial into. And it's almost like there's this invitation into this journey that can lead you deeper and deeper as an exploration. But at the same time, it's an opening out and into and upwards. And my understanding of it through the lens of developing conscious leaders is that this is an opportunity, a way, a path to walk, call it, for one's own journey, you know, in the self-exploration, as Lisa pointed to, into that intrapersonal journey that starts to do this. It starts to automatically broaden our horizon lines, both vertically and horizontally, to develop these different capacities. But what the gift is that it brings in all these other things as almost the berries, you know, the pickings, the fruits of the labor. When one puts in the work, I'm starting to see, oh, and this is what you can get out of it. You know, this is the gift that keeps giving, literally, to oneself and then to others. It's really just brought it alive in such a 3D way. It's not dry research, this. As you say, this is a fascinating area if anyone's interested in you know, delving deeper into it for their own reasons of academic research or whatever. I mean, it really is juicy. And I think it's how we bring it forward, how we teach it, how we explore it, how we relate to it. It's this incredible, rich meal of goodies that are so truly nourishing for us. It's like, why wouldn't we want to choose this? And that's my question to leaders. You know, why don't we choose more of this? What is it that almost sabotages it? I'm curious. That's just a question that's just arisen now in the moment. It's not part of our script at all. But I mean, let's explore that if it feels like, you know, some people have some thoughts about that.
Yeah, that's ignited something in me, and for me, it's going to be an invitation to invite us into a practice. And I think the reason why there is hesitancy is that so much of mindfulness, which is offered these days, can be quite superficial and can really stay at the level of a concept and land up feeling quite one-dimensional and in fact dry and not juicy at all. So one of my approaches, and where I've seen mindfulness in different contexts really come alive, is in ongoing practice, in tasting the practice, not just as I always love this metaphor from one of my teachers, don't just read the menu, taste the menu, order the food, taste it. You might like it, you might not like it, you may spit it out, but you may really be nourished by it. So maybe, I don't know if this might be, maybe there's some more comments, but otherwise I thought this might be a time to run a short practice, something that I've been thinking about as a way to potentially manage one of these, you know, scary or frightening or uncertain, stressful situations that we might experience. So tell me what you think, if there's anything else you want to add.
And you may have covered this, or it might still be something that you're coming to for me, coming also having spent a lot of time in corporate, I think mindfulness is often equated to meditation. So what else is it? Is it only meditation? What else is it? And where does meditation fit into it? Because I think a lot of people feel, oh, I can't meditate, or I've tried and it doesn't work, or it's really not my thing. But is that what it really is about?
That's a great question before we actually try something, Nat. Thanks for bringing it forward. The mindfulness is not meditation. Mindfulness is a way of being. It's a deep orientation to the whole of life itself. It's a rotational shift in consciousness. However, mindfulness is a muscle. It needs to be developed. It needs attention. It needs care. It needs nourishment. And if we don't practice, it will remain, as I said, at that thin level of concept, and it won't penetrate the deeper layers of our being, of our lives, of our networks, of our workspaces. So, and in fact, the research that I was reading these last couple of days, the one thing that really stuck out was that if you don't have a regular practice, and we might call that a meditation practice, but it might not look in the way that people imagine meditation to look, because there's a lot of images in the culture around meditation looking in a particular way, like, you know, sitting cross-legged in a lotus position. Yes, that's one expression of meditation, but I like a much broader definition myself, is that mindfulness is what we are looking to cultivate, and then having some formal meditation practices to do that is really the only way for that to come alive. And so on the mindfulness sort of stream, you could say, of the Master Leader program, I will certainly be offering participants a way to create their own personalized meditation practice, which they can use to develop these skills during the course and then in their lives. There's so much, there's so many wonderful ways to cultivate this practice. And so in answer to your question, there's a difference, and meditation doesn't always look like what we think it looks. Yeah, so a commitment to practice is a part of it. And, you know, maybe that's also the hesitancy. People maybe haven't gone inside themselves in their lives. And so that's why it's really important to go slowly and have small practices, put a toe in the water, get confident, see the benefits, and then slowly build a practice from there. So don't worry, I'm not going to throw you into a 45-minute sitting meditation on your first day of the Master Leader program, but there will definitely be a lot of support for this to be really valuable and take root inside you.
I just also, pick up on something that a word that you use is practice. I recently attended something, and you're so great with words. I recently attended one of your sessions, and the image that I left with was, you know, why is it called practice? Because we practice these things and we hone our skills, not for the sake of practice, but so that when you need it, you've developed the muscle memory kind of thing. So the idea of practice is really, the depth of the word practice is relevant, because you may not need the mindfulness right now, but if you haven't practiced it the day that you do need it, you don't know how to do it. Although
Absolutely.
you're doing it every day, I understand that. But, you know, when you hit a real crisis situation or a really turbulent time.
Yeah. Well, it is a competency. You know, it's quite you know, it's very paradoxical. You know, maybe this is not really the place to go fully into this, but we will explore this more. But it's quite a paradoxical practice, because it's leading you to what's already here and the capacity to be with what's already here. It's very simple, but it's not so easy. And so that's why we call it a practice that's really not about going anywhere in particular, other than being here where you already are and being comfortable with that, with whatever the moment brings. And it seems odd, but that does need a kind of a practicing. But we'll definitely go more into that with time. So I thought if we've got a chance now that I would take us through a very brief practice, one that I think could be very helpful. We could all take it away and try it out, perhaps when stressful circumstances present themselves. And what I'd like to do is to introduce us to the idea of the triangle of awareness, that in any given moment, we have access to, if we choose to land our attention into three big areas of our felt experience. And one is our thoughts, our mental landscape, our emotional landscape, how we're feeling, and the experiences and the sensations in our bodies. And so I'm going to take us through a very short practice. So the first little bit will just be bringing to mind a stressful event that you've had recently. Please don't make it the most stressful event of your life. It can just be something small, something that set you off, just something that just, created that stress reaction in you. And if you'd like to, you can just pop into the chat. I'm going to ask you to drop in and see if you can bring to mind what were some of the thoughts that were running around in your mind as you had this stressful experience. So, any kind of, if you look back now, what is the quality of thinking with any particular thoughts? Just one or two comments would be lovely to work with.
One of, for me, anger.
Anger. Anita says criticism of others or the other. Absolutely. Yeah, maybe we'll popcorn it out instead so that we move things along. So immediately we begin to see that there's an activation at the level of the mind. Mine would be, I can't believe I did that, and Marianne, thank you, disappointment. And disappointment might show up with particular thought patterns associated. Oh, I wish it had been another way. I wish it wasn't this way. Absolutely, Nat. Self-criticism, feeling like, what did I do or didn't do, or should I have, could I have? So that's a flooding that happens in the mental landscape. So now I'm going to ask you to shift your attention to the emotional landscape. How did it feel? How did it feel in your feelings, in your emotions, this stressful event? And you can also just shout it out or pop it in the chat. Marianne, you felt hurt. Absolutely. Hurt is something we can actually we feel it in our heart. We feel it in our center. Our nervous system is on edge. So Anita, what I'm going to ask you to do is to consider whether the nervous system on edge is a body sensation that you're experiencing or an emotion or perhaps an overlap. Because we need to, perhaps be quite clear. Disappointment. What else is here? Feeling insecure. Feeling anxious. Fantastic. So there are emotions that go with these thoughts. And then finally, and maybe Anita, this is where we flow more into your suggestion. What is going on in your body? That's the third tripod of the triangle of awareness. What sensations in your body? I know for me, it's like my palms are sweaty. I've got heat rising up into my face. Hello, heat. Exactly. Heat is a common one in the body. Bursting in the chest, absolutely. Just feeling like some feelings of overwhelm in the actual body. Constriction and tensions, absolutely. So these are all, if I can just bring us back now, these are all the unfolding in the present moment, in the landscape of the triangle of awareness, our thoughts, our feelings, and our sensations. And so this little practice that I'll introduce you to is, if you're in a very, very stressful situation and you have the opportunity to, we don't always have the opportunity to do, but if you have got the chance to step back and just take 3 minutes to yourself, you can just place a hand on your chest or maybe on your belly. And if you're comfortable, you can allow your eyes to close and you can tune in like a radio, that static of everything all going on at once, thoughts, feelings, sensations, the whole bubbling pot of it, you can just quietly, purposefully direct your attention to noticing the thinking or the thoughts that are here. And even if it's just for a moment, to be the observer of your thoughts, to notice them rushing past, is already a step out of the river. A little bit of distance, not completely washed away by the thoughts that are here. And then taking a breath and shifting your attention, what feelings are here? And really with a warm heart toward yourself, making space for the feelings that are here. Ow, this hurts, this is painful. I'm scared. So just making space, allowing, bringing that attitude, Sheldon, as you were saying, of non-judgment. Don't judge the feelings, just let them be here because they're here, simply because they are already here. And now turning to our sensations. How does my body feel? And just really acknowledging there's pain here, there's tightness here, there's heat here. And these are, these are the languages that our being is expressing, the distress of the moment. And so to give it space. And now with intentionality to draw our attention to our center and to feel just for a few moments the rise and fall of our breath in the center of our being. And to really let your attention and the breath become one, so that you really can locate yourself here and now through the breath, through the movement of the breath. And having steadied and resourced yourself with the breath in this moment, I invite you now to open up and just keeping good connection with yourself, open and be spacious to whatever needs to happen next. Any decisions you need to make that, that this maybe the stressful event have brought forward that you need to step into. And even if nothing has changed, even if there's still crazy thinking and a lot of emotions present, a lot of feelings, it's okay. You're honing the skill of being with what's here while it's here, becoming familiar and comfortable with difficulty, meeting that VUCA world inside of ourselves, and then being able to proceed into whatever is being asked of us next from this place, And so that's just a tiny little practice that I hope I can leave you with as a real lived in the moment mindfulness practice that gives us a little bit of space, but also helps us meet more directly and more intimately our direct experience, which is at the heart of the practice.
So beautiful, and thank you for leading us so eloquently through that. There was one moment in there that came to me that allowed me to move deeper into where you were guiding us. And that was when you used the word lean in, Lisa. And for me, that made all the difference, is how do we lean into things when they're difficult to lean into, and do it in a way that you did with us so gently, with so much non-judgment of whatever is arising. This heart of the practice is what came alive for me in that moment. And it felt like we'd touched into the essence of the gold, some of the gold of this mindfulness work. Because for me, the awakening in the workplace comes through this portal of the heart. This isn't a mind-only based exercise, even though it's called mindfulness. There's a lot of heart that gets integrated here. And thank you for showing us the way in that short practice with that.
Maybe for me to just add, I also just love how you ended it where you said, from this place. And I think that's really what we want to try and do with this type of work, is to show people that they have access to that place within themselves. And the real benefit that comes from when you're able to meet the world and the people and the situations that are being thrown at you from that place, that you can show up very differently and you can have a much bigger impact than you ever dreamed possible. Because as you say, Lisa, it's that paradox. It is there. It's just about uncovering it. And Marianne also used the beautiful word recalibrate. How do we just recalibrate ourselves to get back in touch with that sort of that place that gives us that strength? And I think that's really the beauty of this type of work and where we can go with it. It's just really amazing.
And how do you guys, how does this link to resilience? Because that's another word that comes up a lot in business and leadership development, and everything you read now with the uncertainty that we live in is to develop your resilience. How does this link to resilience in that way?
So maybe for me to just jump in there was something that popped into my mind when you were asking that question. I was reading a book a while back by Ram Dass, and he a very interesting person. He was a professor at Harvard University back in the 70s, also experimented a lot with Eastern philosophy and culture and meditation, and he actually encouraged his students to use psychedelics in order to experience altered states of consciousness. He was obviously fired for doing that, but went on to train under a guru in India, and till today he's not alive any longer, but he's written some amazing books and is considered a really true authority on mindfulness, on meditation, etc. And somebody once asked him a question. It was, I don't know if it was in a book, if it was an interview that I was listening to, and they asked him something similar and said to him, how does mindfulness really help? Does it get rid of the anxiety? Does it eventually just go away? And he answered by saying, you know what? It doesn't ever really go away, but it has far less of an impact on me. He basically said one day he woke up and he realized that anxiety that I used to struggle with so much, I don't really notice it anymore that much. It's kind of the power that it used to have over me has lessened dramatically. So the ability to see it for what it is and not get wrapped up in it, I think that's the progression that kind of happens with these types of things. So it's not to say that you completely get rid of these negative emotions or you get rid of these things that are troubling you. But what you begin to notice as you cultivate this practice is that the impact those things used to have on you, they don't seem to have anymore. You seem to be the one that takes that control and a little bit of that power back. So I hope that kind of makes sense. Thanks,
that's lovely. Thank you. I love it.
I'd love to add to that. John Kabat-Zinn's got a beautiful quote, which is much shared, which is that you can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. And I guess when you speak about resilience, what is resilience? This to be able to flow when life throws things at you, to be able to change direction quickly, to feel like you can get up back on your feet, that there's elasticity, there's rebound. And that's what's so beautiful about we're not trying to get rid of things, and we can't get rid of our VUCA world inside or outside. We are talking about the capacity to come into a different relationship with it. And that's just what I'd like to add to that conversation on resilience.
Thank you, Lisa. And such a great question there, Natalie, linking resilience and mindfulness, and how it impacts us as individuals just at that level, adds to the quality of our lives, and in leadership, when we are responsible for others and making big decisions. And this bounce back factor. You know, how long does it take us to come back from events, situations, traumas that take us down, that unseat us? And for me, this practice helps us to get the power back over ourselves, over that part of us, that, or the event or the situation. And that's the journey of mastery. And again, these are the micro practices that build up incrementally to create that masterful leader. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's the practices that we do in the dark. And I think that mindfulness is one of the great tools in our toolkit that equip us for these arduous, challenging times. And when we expect them least and they come around, what have we got there within our reach? Those innate capacities and resources, those inner resources that we can just draw on when we find ourselves exposed, you know, with nothing else available to grasp. This is it, guys and girls. This is it. And so is there anything else that I would sincerely love to offer the opportunity for Marianne, if you would like to pose any questions to the panel today, and to our guest speakers, Sheldon and Lisa, if there are any final parting pearls. You've given us so many pearls already of your wisdom and your experience. But let's just start to round up the conversation.
Thank you for the wonderful session. I fell upon your course or on this webinar when I was on LinkedIn, and I'm not involved as a practitioner at all, as you are, as sort of thinking academics, but more like I started doing a few courses during lockdown last year, and it's really helped me so much in personal life and in business, especially from the likes of not shooting from the hip, you know, being able to take a step back, step out of a situation, to be able to handle stressful stories a lot more aplomb. So thank you for letting me sit in on your stories today. I learned a huge amount more. And yeah, and I actually didn't really think about it as applying it into leadership position, rather just myself and helping myself cope. So it's provided me a lot of food for thought, so to speak. So thank you all.
Fantastic. Thanks, Marianne. And I think it's such a wonderful way of coming to mindfulness. I think that's how a lot of people discover it. And I think you're so right. You know, when we speak about leadership, there's different contexts. We're all leading ourselves, we're leading our families, our communities, etc. So I think it's relevant across the board, just as you said. Every person that is able to enhance themselves a little bit through mindfulness, I like to believe, is having a bigger impact, not only for themselves, but for every life that they touch. So that's wonderful. I encourage you to continue.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well.
It's Sheldon, you've just sparked something in me, which was actually you've added another dimension to what I was actually going to say, because one of the other ways to view mindfulness is that it's inhabiting more and more and more moments of our day with awareness. It's remembering that we're already here, and can we be where we already are. And so this is sometimes likened to sort of one of those dot-to-dot puzzles. You know, there are 3 dots on the page, and then there are 15 dots on the page. And then eventually there are lots of dots which are connected on the page. And so moments of mindfulness are like that. But what you're also speaking to is then these, you know, this like an interconnectedness, you know, connection between, you don't split it off. It, you know, and Marianne, what you're saying, it's not just about mindfulness in your life. It suddenly can hop over just with being introduced to it into leadership. And so these dots can expand, but, you know, both inside ourselves as you know, being this lovely big dot-to-dot puzzle of moments of mindfulness that we inhabit, but also linking between us, and this interconnectedness between us, which I think is such a, you know, valuable and beautiful aspect of this practice, is recognizing these points of connection. So yeah, And I guess, if I had to leave with one parting thing, it would be with really a little practice, which we can all take away, Anita, when you have ended the webinar, which is that transitioning is a very, very important portal opportunity for practice, because we so often skip over, I've got to be here. So you don't know how you get from A to B. You don't know how, you got from the car to the door, or how the car even made the journey, all of these things. So one of the practices that I love to encourage is a transitioning practice. And so when we leave this call, what I'd like to invite each of you, if it feels good and feels nice, is not to jump off your chair, not to leap for the mouse, but to just sit for a moment, take in, breathe in, let infuse what we've shared together, and then purposefully, okay, this is what I'm going to do next, and take something of yourself into the next experience, or the next demand of the day. So yeah, that would be my final little offering. And then just also to say, it's just been such a wonderful conversation, and I feel like there is so much more that we can say and will say, and I look forward to that.
Thank you. Thank you all, and may your day and your days be enriched by this. And
thank you.
Please share it with people. If they want to come and watch the replay at some point, we'll have it on our YouTube channels. So you can always reference it again if it's useful. And we thank you for joining us in this very intimate gathering today.